Hey, what's up, guys? So we got a, mini Tweek Talks episode here. It's really hard for us to get the whole gang together and schedule everybody together because Tweek has traveled to Hawaii for KawaiiCon, and we're obviously super busy, doing some tourist stuff and just exploring Hawaii in general. So we are going to do this mini episode, and the main topic of discussion will be characters that are falling off in the meta. So there's obviously a lot of characters that have had some ups and downs in the meta, but we've recently kind of seen some characters fall off that were very strong and popular. I think right off the top of my head, I'm thinking, Byleth, Sephiroth, and you even said Pac-Man you feel like is kind of falling off because there's other characters that kind of just do what these characters do, but in a better fashion. So what character do you want to start off with?
Yeah, I think Byleth is a decent one.
Mm-hmm. Was winning tournaments.
Yeah, Leo obviously could do that with a lot of characters and all that, but with Byleth, I think it's an interesting case of people fleshing out footstool stuff. It's not like the biggest one, but it's an interesting layer to it.
And fun fact, Byleth can't do footstool dare because her dare comes out on frame 22. And you mentioned on one of the previous episodes, you have 21 frames of advantage.
Yeah.
So it's just one frame off, and if
pretty
Byleth,
sure it's 20.
No, you're right. Okay. So it's Byleth is just one frame away, and if Byleth could footstool dare, that would be a huge game changer because dare one kills and does a ton of damage.
So Byleth is like a pretty slow character with like some two pieces here and there, some things that are pretty difficult to deal with, like the multi-hit neutral air, the landing hitbox. Some decent out of shield as well with that move and with up B. Some simple edge guarding, some early kills.
Great recovery.
Yeah, but when things get fleshed out, like I feel like it's something I always use for this type of situation is like if you can ignore a character with your own character and kind of just like let them kind of flail like a fish out of water, that's probably some sort of weakness that's developing in the character. That's how I like to view it. Like if a character has a hard time putting their presence onto the opponent, then I think that's difficult. And I think in a way, because Byleth is like some slow, some two pieces here and there, some out of shield stuff. The character's still good, but the character definitely can't randomly shoot up to be like one of the best in the game. And despite Sephiroth and Byleth being probably similar on the tier list, probably for the entirety of them being out together, I think them not being as strong is probably for different reasons. I don't know how you feel about that, but yeah, that's how I feel about Byleth, at least, where it's like just the way everything naturally develops. Like Sora, Byleth, Sephiroth are usually like compared. There's probably something else too. Corrin is kind of was in there, but now Corrin's like completely shot past some of those characters.
Yeah.
And I feel like, when the game gets older, I feel like you're going to look for more options and more depth and some flexibility, and Sora, Corrin might provide more of that when it comes to the sword type of characters.
Yeah, I feel like Sephiroth and Byleth fall underneath the slow sword characters, and there's just other sword characters that are faster. They can kind of do similar things, like Lucina's pretty quick. Obviously, Cloud is, up there when it comes to faster sword characters. I think Cloud is the epitome of sword characters, to be fair. Outside of Pyra/Mythra. Because Pyra/Mythra sometimes plays Pyra plays like a traditional sword character. Slower, active hitboxes, very huge range, but then you can switch to Mythra to completely change up the tempo and get that, speed that is so important in today's meta, because the more speed you have, the more flexibility you have in neutral, your dash back being very strong. So this is kind of the standard of sword characters, and I think the only reason Corrin is still slow, but we've seen Corrin take advantage of okay, if you retreat from Corrin, you're putting yourself in the corner, and then from the ledge, or if Corrin wins any kind of neutral interaction by the edge, her ledge trapping is so powerful, her two framing is so powerful. And it just feels like she has a complete package and even then she also packs a punch like Byleth, right? Like the only thing that feels kind of, bullshit for Byleth is catching someone's ledge jump with like drag down nair, earthquake hitbox into like run off fair. That's
a nightmare scenario if you're playing against Byleth, yeah.
That's like the only one that's crazy though, and I feel like the percentage range in which that works is a little bit slimmer than someone like Corrin, where like nair and fair into bear have it's such a wide range too. It can KO you if you get hit by like 70 or 80% with Corrin having rage, you're just done, right?
Yeah.
And then it still works up until like 110, 120 range. Like it's just when you have a wide range of threat, that's when things start becoming more consistent, and especially in a tournament environment where you don't have to. If your percentage range for certain confirms are at a smaller window, then the counterplay is easier, right? Because it's just like, oh, don't ledge jump against Byleth at like 50, 60-ish%, right? And then past that, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, like my ledge bump could get blown up from like a forward smash or something, but that takes more like pre-positioning and stuff like that. And yeah, it also feels like Corrin having a really large hitbox underneath Corrin. We've seen characters like Sonic not do bad against Corrin, but like people are starting to use Corrin against Sonic specifically, because it's like, oh, I don't have the speed necessarily, but I can cover myself in hitboxes where I think you'll end up with the spin dash, and then I can hit you
control
from
the stage well, like
exactly. So it's like with the spike of how Sonic and Corrin are interacting, and just how important it is to beat Sonic the character to win a major, because of how well Sonic's is doing, it just feels like these slower characters are kind of falling out of favor, right? And I could still see Byleth maybe doing pretty well against Steve, because you have the disjoints and stuff like that, but I just still feel like characters like Corrin or Cloud are going to do even better versus Steve. So even the things that Byleth or Sephiroth could do well, there's just other characters that can do it even better, and it feels like there's just like, why would you play these characters if you're trying to compete seriously, unless you just really like them or you're just really trying to make them work, when there's other available options that are just so much better.
I think you mentioned a couple important things with Corrin's strengths, like the two framing and ledge trapping, because something Byleth has that is like pretty ridiculous is edge guarding.
Yes, the uppy edge guards.
It's kind of a scenario where there's nothing the opponent can do, like it's just like a stock deleted type of thing,
right?
And it's pretty hard to mess that up for Byleth in that situation when it comes to timing it. And that's really strong. But Corrin has the two framing and the ledge trapping. If it was just the ledge trapping, I think Byleth would have more value. But the two framing is pretty crazy, and it's not just like getting a hit, like the pin deletes your stock.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. And Corrin also has the footstool dare. Shattuck's been doing great with that. A lot more leniency. It's relatively fast, so you have a lot of room for error with the frame advantage of a footstool.
Right.
So that definitely helps. Corrin's frame trapping and just like general combo starting is like off of more moves. It's at any percent. Corrin also gets solid damage out of throws that some Fire Emblems don't get when it comes to like not combo throws.
Right.
A lot of Fire Emblem characters get really low damage, but Corrin's like dragon throws do a lot of damage. And for Sephiroth, I think the hardest thing is like a lot of his moves are hard to patch together to make a solid game plan. There's like some negative stuff on hit. He's super big and light. A lot of his things that are seen as strengths can be pretty rough weaknesses against characters that don't really care about it, like the ledge stalling or the re-grabs or the recovery. There's
also a character with very strong offstage like Byleth.
Yeah.
And even has like two framing, but then doesn't have the ledge trapping, right? Like there's like some kind of hole in the armor type thing.
Yeah, a lot of the time it feels like Sephiroth doesn't have a win condition. His ledge trapping doesn't really result in a confirm. His two framing is never really a kill.
And if it is, it's risky, like the up B2
super risky. Yeah. So it feels like you're kind of patchworking things, but you never quite get something great. But sometimes you can't help but feel like there's potential, so I'll always play him. But
I mean, the highs are high. Like you get an up B2 frame or a down air 2 frame, you delete stocks and stuff. But I just feel like
getting the frames is just so tough. Like having being able to have the time to do anything is really tough. But yeah, there's a lot of dead zones on his moves. Like a lot of his moves are like he gets stray hits almost the entire game. Uh, so it's difficult. Like if you look at Sora and Corrin, like they get something started off more hits, they get like more win conditions and confirms. So that's just naturally some kind of flexibility. Like Corrin has a kill throw. If Sephiroth had something like a kill throw, that would help a lot for how hard it is to work his moves together into like a flow of like confirms and stuff like that.
And then frame trapping, man. I feel like frame trapping is so underrated in today's meta, and it's like, especially in tournament frame trapping, because frame trapping is very flowcharty. So it's like you're not gonna frame trap differently for the most part. Yeah. So when Fox, Corrin, or Game & Watch, they do their
it's just all timing
flow chart. Yeah, as long as you time everything correctly, you do this flow chart, and you're going to get something out of it. It puts way less on your mental. Whereas like Sephiroth or Byleth, you're gonna have to like guess you have to take more risk. The reward might be a little bit higher, but arguably like characters like Corrin and Fox, they're killing you anyway off the frame trap, right? So it's like the amount of mental energy it takes to do something like that, and this is. We're specifically talking about top level play in tournament because there's so much going on. There's nerves. There's, you're thinking about so many different things. And I mean, just having something simplified is so important, which is why, and like now we're seeing like Game Watch and Rob really spike up because having your gameplay simplified makes it so you can do the other things that are harder in Ultimate, just like how fast the game is easier for you, or you can put more mental energy into it.
And Sephiroth, when it comes to like frame trapping and like putting pressure on, he does a lot of like jab with a frame trap or like something small. He abuses his fast fall speed a lot to get like grabs, but it never puts anything together crazy where like you lose a stock for guessing wrong or you lose a stock for like falling for some sort of pressure. You get a few chances to deal with Sephiroth, I think, and because of his frame data and where he positions a lot of the time, it's very easy to like survive for a while with his stocks, and it's pretty easy to manage your shield health despite him having like a shield breaker and stuff like that. You have to mess up quite a few times, I think, to lose a stock, especially because it's not going to be to a confirm, like a quick confirm as well. Like he doesn't have anything like that. So it's tough. I think something Sephiroth has over all of those is probably the best counter.
Another high-risk move.
If he has a crazy call-out, you'll die really early. Some characters just can't recover, kind of like a Byleth type of thing. And sometimes you want to take that risk because you know your ledge trapping is pretty weak. So that it's interesting funneling the risks into Sephiroth gameplay because you have to consider wing and you have to consider your character's weight and stuff. But it's still worth working on, I think, if you play the character. And I think Sephiroth's also a little bit easier to parry than the other characters. Less multi-hits. A lot of the frame data is a similar flow. When he goes for a mix-up, it's probably even more slow and reactable, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, there is an interesting dynamic because a lot of those characters that we just talked about, like those handful of sword characters, they're like trying to catch up to the best sword characters, and a lot of the time they're pretty comparable on a tier list. But I think recently there's been more of a gap, and Sephiroth and Byleth seem to be buddies on the tier list, and it seems like they're losing the rest of the people at the lunch table because they're either they're probably getting better or something like that. Yeah, and Sephiroth also, like, his neutral, like, he has a projectile, but his neutral B is pretty terrible. I would say the most useful neutral B is the second one to try to, when they're on the ledge, like, give them something to deal with. Shadow Flare is negative on hit, but it's, like, so important. It's a really difficult character to have solid game plans with because I think because of how patchworky it feels, matchups are very separated, where a lot of times sword characters don't separate matchups a ridiculous amount. Usually it's just a couple game plans for all the roster. But I guess moving on from swords,
before we move on, you guys can check out the rest of this episode on the Patreon. We're just splitting it real quick. So if you guys do want to support Tweek Talks and just Tweek in general, make sure to check out the Patreon, and you can go ahead and subscribe and catch the rest of this episode.
Thank you.